Hi everyone. I'm still trying to perfect my video capabilities. I'm trying to learn how to stitch some of these together. I haven't really figured it out yet. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to put together a few short ones right after I do this video. But I just wanted to talk to everyone about brakes. I know you guys did the chapter. I've been trying to deal with a little bit of a few issues that people have had with the login for the site. I just want to remind everyone to make sure that when you're going in to access the textbook and the workbook, try Chrome. I did talk to the tech people at Goodhart Wilcox, and that was their suggestion, is that Chrome works the best for your browser. And the other thing too is just make sure that when you're doing your login that you're using all lowercase letters. As I started talking about in Brakes, there's some things that you guys really need to keep in mind. And when you're working on a brake system on a car, the one thing to always keep in mind is that brakes are going to create the biggest liability that you're ever going to have working on cars. You never want to do a patch job on a brake system. You want to make sure that you're doing a complete job, not just fixing one area. What ultimately happens is if you just fix part of a brake system, especially if you've inspected it and you knowingly have another issue with it, that is the one thing that's going to end you up back in court. I have worked in different shops, and brakes are a huge issue. A lot of times customers will feel that shops go overboard on brake systems when they're doing the repairs. And as they're doing an inspection, if there's anything that's questionable, they do want to replace it. And there is a reason for that. So just keep that in mind. Some of the things that we covered in power mechanics, for instance, was using a micrometer. And the most common thing that you're going to use a micrometer for on brake systems is going to be on the brake rotors themselves. Now, we didn't really get a chance to go through the inspection process. We do have brake shoe gauges at the school for checking the thickness. If we look in electronic service information, there's always going to be a specification for brake pad thickness and brake shoe thickness. So we always want to look at that. If we just glance at pads and guess that they're 50% worn, on a lot of cars, the pads are relatively thin. One for instance I have is on my Honda. If you look at the rear pads, they're probably half the thickness of the front pads, and they're perfectly fine. But if someone just goes in, makes a guess, they'd look at them and they'd say, yes, the rear pads are in excess of 50% worn, when in reality the new pads you put in may not be any better than what they were when you started. So just kind of keep those things in mind. Make sure you're looking up specifications. Rotor thicknesses, most shops just go with replacing rotors across the board. They'll measure them, and if they're below spec, they'll replace them. Most shops will just quote just putting new rotors in, because then if you have any signs of warpage, any gouging, any kind of grooves in the rotors, they don't even have brake lathes anymore. Brake lathes have kind of gotten pushed to the side. I know when I was working on cars for a long time, they went with just these asbestos pads and linings, which worked really well. Then later on, they started evolving where they were using metallic pads, semi-metallic pads. They actually had metal embedded in the linings, and it gave better stopping power. But what happened is the rotors and drums had a tendency to wear much more quickly. So if you did use a micrometer on the rotor, you'd check it out, and they were always below minimum spec. So everyone just started replacing them, and then their brake lathes weren't getting used anymore. Now we are going to get a brake lathe in our program for next year, but unfortunately, unless you guys decide to come back and take the class, then we'll you may not get a chance to use that. What I do want you guys to always keep in mind, though, is you need to address the rotors. Most of the time, if you're doing a test drive on a car prior to doing a brake job, you're going to look for pulsation in the brake pedal, which would mean either the brake pedal is going to actually pulse up and down as you hit it lightly, or you may find that the steering wheel is moving back and forth slightly as you hit the brakes. Those are all indications of warped rotors. In checking for warped rotors, you can't check that with a micrometer. What you do have to do is set up a dial indicator on that rotor, rotate it, and normally the specification for that is less than 5/1000ths of an inch is acceptable. Anything like 5 and over, the rotors either need to be machined or they need to be replaced. So just some of those things. You're always going to look for leakage. You want to make sure that you don't have anything seeping from wheel cylinders or calipers. If you see any signs of fluid loss anywhere, you need to replace those. Also, you need to look for brake hoses. Make sure the brake hoses aren't cracked, and that's the rubber area in the brake hose. You're going to look for lines. Make sure you don't have any kind of seepage. Normally, if a line is bad, you're going to know it right away. They get real rusty. They have a tendency to rust and leak where they have clamps that hold them to the frame rail. It just traps moisture in there, and they start to rust. The other thing that happens too is if you ever have a car that comes in with a brake line that's bad, a steel brake line, chances are you're going to end up replacing all of those lines. If one goes bad, I have run into it way too many times where you replace the bad one, you start bleeding the brakes, and when you're bleeding them by pumping on the brake pedal, you're putting more pressure than you would normally put on by normal braking. So in many cases, that line, another line is going to break. It's like a domino effect. So just kind of keep in mind that if you're replacing one, you got to replace them all. So, and we could probably talk about that a little bit later on. Again, in these videos, I just got those short clips of one car I was working on in my shop at home. It's hard for me to try to one-hand my cell phone when I'm trying to take a video of myself. I'm going to try to have to set up a little bit more of a stand, and I do have to try to figure out how I'm going to edit some of these videos. But anyway, the videos that follow are just on the rear of this truck. It's a 2005 Chevrolet 1500 four-wheel drive extended or crew cab, and so it has rear drum brakes. There is that big horseshoe spring on there, and again, there is that special tool that I'm showing in there. You cannot do those without having that special tool to spread that spring, and believe me, I have tried. It's just it's difficult to do even with the tool, but it's even worse to try to do it without it. So the other thing is, I really didn't go through doing the whole the measurement process with the rotors or checking for warpage. I did check those. I did reuse them. The other thing that I did with that is on the anti-lock brake system on the Chevy trucks, the ABS unit is actually located right under the driver's seat. And there is a bleed procedure that you go through using a scan tool. I showed you a quick video of that, but all you do is you put it to the automated bleed setting on the scan tool, and then when you hold the brake pedal down, you hit continue, and it actually just runs the ABS pump and it pushes fluid through the system. So it's a good way of working all of the air out of that system. It's not totally necessary, but it just makes for a lot cleaner process. So again, just kind of watch those quick. I do want you to answer a couple of questions. I just want to know that you've gone through and looked at the videos. I do want you guys just to send me a response to this, and I'm going to ask what special tool is necessary for the rear brakes on this 2005 Silverado truck, and the answer to that is going to be the brake spring tool. The other thing is what is needed to bleed the brakes on this system, and the answer is just to use a scan tool. So again, I'm going to try to do more videos. I realize that we were hoping this was going to be a little bit more of a temporary situation, and now, as you know, we're going to be going to the end of the year with this. So I'm again trying to polish my technique a little bit, and I'm hoping to make it more interesting for you guys. I know I had a couple people that wanted me to do a tour of my shop at home. I will do that. I have a lot of stuff in there. I've got a lot of tools and equipment, but my garage is a mess. So I am going to clean it up a little bit more before I tour you guys around so you can see that. But anyway, everybody stay safe. Make sure you're washing your hands, and I will talk to you later.